Lichtenstein was born in New York into an upper middle class Jewish family. His father was a real estate broker. His mother was a homemaker. He was raised in the Upper West Side, attended public school until the age of 12, then went to New York's Dwight School, graduating from there in 1940. He became interested in art and design really as a hobby and kind of debating on both art and kind of graphic design. He left New York to study at the Ohio State University, which offered him studio courses and a degree in fine arts. His studies were suddenly halted because he did a 3-year stint in the Army during and after World War II between 1943 and 1946. While there, he served as an orderly, a draftsman, and an artist. He returned home to visit his dying father and was discharged from the Army and returned to studies in Ohio under the supervision of one of his teachers named Hoyt L. Sherman, who is widely regarded to have a huge impact and a significant influence on his work. Lichtenstein entered the graduate program at Ohio State and was hired as an art instructor, and a post he held on and on for the next 10 years, actually. He received a master's of fine arts and from the Ohio State University eventually. In 1951, he finally had his first solo show at the Carlbach Gallery in New York. 1951. Moved to Cleveland in the same year, where he remained for the next 6 years and had 2 sons. In 1957, he moved back to New York, upstate, and began teaching again. And he was at the University of New York at Oswego in 1958. And about this time, he began to incorporate images of cartoon characters such as Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny into his abstract works. In 1960, he started teaching at Rutgers University, where he was heavily influenced by Alan Kapro, who was also a teacher at the university. And this really heightened his interest in kind of like a proto-pop imagery, kind of like now taking some of his abstract kind of cartoons and making them more newspaper print technique versions. In 1961, he began his first pop paintings using cartoon images and techniques derived from appearances of commercial printing. This would continue to 1965 and include the use of advertising imagery and consumerism and homemaking. Again, the heart of what all things I think we know of as pop art. His first work to feature large-scale uses of hard-edged figures and Ben-Day dots was Look Mickey. The piece came about from a challenge from one of his sons, who pointed to a Mickey Mouse comic and said to his dad, "I bet you can't paint as good as that, huh, Dad?" And his dad kind of used that as a kind of a challenge and literally replicated that, everything about it, the comic, the look of how the comic was printed, and made it into a large-scale canvas painting. In the same way, he produced 6 other works with recognizable characters from gum wrappers and cartoons. In 1961, Leo Castelli started displaying Lichtenstein's work at his gallery in New York. Lichtenstein had his first one-man show at the Castelli Gallery in 1962. The entire collection was bought by influencers before the show even opened. So when he was first finally this new look, I guess, of his work, which it took a long time to evolve, and I like how it was partly because of his son's kind of challenge. I think suddenly, I mean, it's like that the overnight success took many years to get to, but finally he was like suddenly like a very well-known commercial artist. Some of his best-known works are relatively close but not exact copies of book panels, a subject that was largely abandoned, and he largely abandoned in 1965. Although you would see a lot of it kind of coming into his work in later decades. The panels were originally drawn by comics such as Jack Kirby, DC Comics, and Russ Heath, Irv Novick. The list goes on, and none of these people receive credit. So I think this is an important thing to mention because much like sampling, there was a gray area by what is considered just copying and pure plagiarism, and there's a fine line. You could sample a song. There's a certain amount of legal, kind of how many seconds or what's the riff in music-wise that actually feels like you're actually copying someone else's music. It's kind of similar here when it came to him, like kind of replicating almost perfectly a comic. from one of these artists, and making it into your own painting. Yes, you blew it up and you made it, you handcrafted it, but it's still, in a way, like just a giant enlargement of something that you probably, that he probably found. So I don't know. I think there's an ongoing debate about that. Cartoonist Art Spiegelman commented that Lichtenstein did no more or less for comics than Andy Warhol did for soup. Famously, what Lichtenstein did, which is kind of revolutionary, was took a tiny picture smaller than the palm of your hand, printed it in 4 colors on newsprint, and blew it up to a conventional size, in which he kind of, in a way, took low art and created high art, and not just because of scale, but because you suddenly put this little tiny, gum wrapper comic on a giant canvas, and just by the nature of it, you've created now, considered high art. Although Lichtenstein's comic-based work gained some acceptance, concerns were still expressed by critics that say Lichtenstein did not credit or pay any royalties or seek permission from the original artist or copyright holders. Here's a little bit about that.